The stars had never seen anything like the Devastator before. It stood 12 meters tall, in the weapon testing facility on Valoria Prime, its metal body gleaming under the artificial suns. The machine looked like death itself had taken solid form. Two massive arms ended in plasma cannons that could melt through starship hulls. Its legs were thick as tree trunks, designed to carry 40 tons of pure destruction across any battlefield. War engineer Cairo walked around his creation with pride burning in his chest. For 3 years he had worked on this project. 3 years of sleepless nights, failed prototypes, and endless calculations. Now his dream stood before him, ready to bring the Valorian Empire victory across the galaxy. The machine's head turned as Cairo approached. Red sensors scanned the engineer, recognizing him as its creator. The artificial intelligence inside the Devastator was perhaps the most advanced ever built. It could process battlefield information faster than any living mind. It could predict enemy movements before they happened. It never got tired, never felt fear, never hesitated to kill. "Show me the combat protocols," Cairo said to his assistant, a younger engineer named Velta. The holographic display came to life above them. Numbers and charts filled the air, showing the Devastator's capabilities. Its quantum steel armor could stop any known weapon. Its plasma cannons could fire continuously for hours without overheating. Its movement systems let it run faster than most vehicles, while weighing as much as a small building. "The Emperor will be pleased," Velta said quietly. "With this machine, we can conquer any world we choose." Cairo nodded but did not smile. He had built something terrible and beautiful. The Devastator was more than a weapon, it was the end of war itself. No army could stand against it, no defense could stop it. Soon, every species in the galaxy would kneel before Valorian might. The first test came on the mining world of Kepler-7. The local government had refused to pay tribute to the Empire. They had hired mercenaries and built defensive positions. They thought their mountain fortresses would protect them. The Devastator landed alone on the planet's surface. One machine against 5,000 defenders. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When the smoke cleared, nothing moved on Kepler-7 except the Devastator. It walked through the ruins of the defensive lines, stepping over melted tanks and collapsed bunkers. Its red sensors swept the area, looking for any remaining resistance. It found none. The recordings of that battle spread through the Empire like wildfire. Soldiers who had fought for decades watched in amazement as the Devastator tore through enemy positions like paper. Generals who had planned complex campaigns realized they would never need large armies again. Politicians saw the future of Valorian expansion stretching across the stars. But it was only the beginning. The Centauri Federation had the strongest military in 3 sectors. Their elite guard units had never lost a battle. Their advanced weapons could punch holes through mountains. Their tactical commanders were taught at the finest war colleges in known space. The Devastator fought them on the plains of New Centauri. 8,000 Federation soldiers in the most advanced combat armor ever made. Hover tanks that could fly at supersonic speeds. Artillery pieces that fired shells guided by artificial intelligence. The Federation forces lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Supreme Commander Yunki of the Federation fleet watched the battle from orbit. He had commanded fleets that conquered solar systems. He had seen weapons that could crack planets in half. But nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed on New Centauri. The Devastator moved through the battlefield like a force of nature. Plasma fire from its arms turned hover tanks into clouds of superheated gas. When Federation soldiers tried to surround it, the machine simply spun in place, its weapons creating a circle of death around its position. Artillery shells that could destroy city blocks bounced off its armor like raindrops. "How is this possible?" Yunki whispered to his tactical officer. The officer, a veteran named Hajin, shook his head. "It's not just the armor or the weapons, sir, it's the way it moves. The machine predicts everything our soldiers do before they do it. It's like fighting an opponent who can see the future." When the battle ended, Yunki sent a message to every Federation fleet in space. "Do not engage the Valorian Devastator with ground forces. Repeat, do not engage with ground forces. This machine cannot be stopped by conventional warfare." But the message came too late for many worlds. The warrior clans of Rigel Prime had fought for honor for 1,000 years. Their champions wielded energy blades that could cut through starship hulls. They rode into battle on creatures bred for war, beasts with claws like swords and hide thick as armor. The clan warriors had never known defeat because they had never met an enemy they could not overcome with courage and skill. Clan leader Tejo led 10,000 warriors against the Devastator on the red sands of Rigel Prime. They charged as their ancestors had charged for centuries, screaming war cries that could be heard across the desert. Their war beasts thundered across the sand, ready to tear apart any enemy that dared face them. The Devastator stood alone on a small hill, waiting. Its red sensors tracked the approaching army. Its artificial intelligence calculated firing solutions. For every target, when the warriors came within range, it began to fire. The plasma cannon spoke with voices like thunder. Each shot could kill dozens of warriors at once. The war beasts, bred to fear nothing, turned and fled from the impossible heat. Warriors who had fought dragons found themselves running from a single machine that seemed to command the very elements. Tato himself reached the Devastator's position. His energy blade, forged by master smiths and blessed by ancient spirits, struck the machine's armor with all his strength behind it. The blade shattered like glass. The Devastator's massive hand closed around Tejo and lifted him into the air. "You fight with honor," the machine said, in a voice like grinding metal, "but honor cannot stop progress." The battle on Rigel Prime lasted 1 hour and 53 minutes. When it ended, the proud warrior clans existed only in memory. News of these victories reached every corner of the galaxy. Species that had never heard of the Valorian Empire suddenly knew its name. Worlds that had resisted conquest for centuries began sending messages of surrender before Valorian. Fleets even arrived in their systems. The Devastator became a legend of terror. Parents told children stories about the metal demon that could not be killed. Soldiers had nightmares about red sensors that saw through walls and plasma fire that never missed its target, but the machine's greatest test was yet to come. Quiet corner of the galaxy. On worlds that most civilizations considered unimportant, lived a species that had never heard the word impossible. They called themselves humans, and they were about to meet the Devastator on a small colony world called New Sol. The Valorian fleet arrived at the edge of the human solar system with confidence built on 17 victories. Admiral Suko commanded the invasion force from his flagship, watching the blue-green world grow larger on his screens. "Deploy the Devastator," he ordered. "Let us finish this quickly and move on to more important conquests." The machine prepared for battle once again, its systems checking weapons and armor. Its artificial intelligence reviewed the data on human military capabilities. The humans had no advanced technology, no energy weapons. Nuquintu armor. They would be the easiest victory yet. The Devastator had no way of knowing that easy victories were about to end forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across New Sol Colony as Colonel Dong-Su stood on the command center balcony. He held his coffee cup with steady hands, but his eyes showed the weight of knowing what was coming. 300 soldiers. That was all he had to defend 12,000 colonists against the most feared weapon in the galaxy. "Sir, the evacuation ships are loading the last civilians," reported Sergeant Hyenwu as he climbed the stairs to join his commander. The young sergeant had been on New Sol for only 6 months, but he had earned respect through his calm leadership. During the crisis, Dong-Su nodded without taking his eyes off the horizon. "How many got out?" "About 9,000, sir. The remaining 3,000 refused to leave. They say this is their home, and they will not run from aliens." The colonel sighed. He understood their choice. New Sol had been built by families who wanted to start fresh among the stars. They had turned empty land into farms and forests. They had built schools and hospitals and small towns that felt like the old country back on Earth. To abandon it all felt like losing a piece of their souls. "What about our defensive positions?" Dong-Su asked. Lieutenant Soyoung joined them on the balcony, her tablet showing tactical displays. She was the youngest officer in the Colonial Defense Force, but her strategic mind impressed everyone who worked with her. "The artillery is positioned on Hill 47 and Hill 52. Our tanks are spread along the main approach routes. The infantry has dug in around the city center." Dong-Su studied the defensive plan. It looked good on paper, but he had read the reports from other worlds. The Devastator had faced armies 10 times larger, with weapons far more advanced. Still, they had to try. "And our special weapons?" he asked quietly. Soyoung's expression darkened. "The plasma rifles arrived yesterday. We have enough for 2 squads. The new armor suits are being distributed to our best soldiers. Captain Minho is testing the experimental missiles now." None of them mentioned what everyone knew. These weapons had been used against the Devastator before. They had all failed. Down in the motor pool, Jinho was checking the power systems on a defensive turret when the sirens began to wail. He was not a soldier. His job was maintaining the colony's machinery and vehicles. But when the invasion alert came, every person who could hold a weapon had volunteered to fight. Jinho was 42 years old and had spent 20 years working with machines. He understood how things moved, how they broke, how they could be repaired or destroyed. His grandfather, Sio Chin, had been a mechanic back on Earth, and he had taught Jinho that every machine had weak points if you knew where to look. "Jinho, grab your rifle," called Sergeant Miran as she ran past. "They are coming down now." He looked up at the sky and saw it, a dark shape falling through the atmosphere like a meteor. The Devastator was coming to New Sol. The machine landed 5 kilometers outside the colony with an impact that shook buildings. Dust and debris flew in all directions as 40 tons of war machine touched down on Korean soil. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the red sensors began to glow. Colonel Dong-Su watched through his binoculars as the Devastator rose to its full height. Even at this distance, the machine looked impossibly large and threatening. Its plasma cannons swiveled as it scanned the defensive positions. "All units, this is command." Dongsu spoke into his radio. The target is now active. Begin attack pattern, Alpha. The first artillery shells screamed across the morning sky. They were the most powerful weapons the colony possessed, each one carrying enough explosive force to destroy a building. The shells struck the Devastator dead center, creating explosions that could be seen from orbit. When the smoke cleared, the machine stood unchanged. Not even a scratch marked its quantum steel armor. Pattern Beta, Dongsu ordered, his voice still calm. Despite what they had all witnessed, the tanks opened fire next. Their main guns had been designed to stop enemy armor on a dozen different worlds. Shells that could punch through 3 meters of reinforced steel struck the Devastator from multiple angles. The machine did not even slow down. It began walking toward the colony. Private Genesio was manning one of the plasma rifle positions when the Devastator came into range. He had been chosen for this weapon because he had the steadiest hands in the unit. The plasma rifle was supposed to be powerful, enough to damage the machine's armor. "Steady, Genesio," whispered Corporal Wu Jin, who was spotting targets. "Wait for the perfect shot." Genesio centered his crosshairs on what looked like a sensor cluster on the machine's head. He held his breath and squeezed the trigger. The plasma bolt flew straight and true, striking exactly where he aimed. The Devastator's head turned toward their position. Its red sensors focused on the 2 soldiers. Genesio realized with horror that his best shot had done absolutely nothing. The machine's right arm rose. The plasma cannon began to glow. "Run!" Wu Jin screamed. They dove from their position just as superheated death turned their defensive bunker into molten metal. The heat was so intense that trees, 50 meters away, burst into flames. Across the battlefield, the same scene played out again and again. Every weapon the humans tried failed. Every defensive position was destroyed. The Devastator moved through their lines like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. Captain Minho led the power armor squad in a desperate charge. These suits were the most advanced equipment the colony possessed. They could stop rifle bullets and let a soldier carry weapons too heavy for normal infantry. "For New Seoul," Minho shouted as his squad opened fire with everything they had. The experimental missiles struck the Devastator's torso. The explosions were bright enough to blind anyone looking directly at them. For a moment, hope flared in human hearts. Then the machine emerged from the fire, completely undamaged. Its left arm swept across the attacking squad like a giant fly. The power armor suits, designed to protect against anything humans could build, crumpled like paper. Captain Minho found himself lying in a crater, his suit systems failing around him. Through his cracked visor, he watched the Devastator step over his fallen soldiers and continue its advance. In 2 hours, Colonel Dongsu's force of 300 had been reduced to 30 survivors. They retreated through the colony's industrial sector, carrying their wounded and trying to stay ahead of certain death. Sergeant Hyun-woo helped Lieutenant Soyoung walk, despite her injured leg. "Where can we go, sir?" he asked Colonel Dongsu. "That thing destroyed everything we had in 2 hours." Dongsu looked back at the smoke rising from their former positions. "The old factory complex. We make our final stand there." As they moved through the abandoned buildings, Jinho stayed near the rear of the group, while the others focused on their retreat. He kept looking back at the Devastator. The machine was following them slowly, almost casually. It knew the humans had nowhere left to run, but Jinho was not thinking about running. He was studying the way the machine moved. He watched how it lifted each massive leg, how it balanced its weight when turning, how the joints moved under the stress of carrying 40 tons. "Ginho, hurry up," called Sergeant Miran. "That thing will be here soon." Ginho nodded but did not stop watching. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "Every machine has a weakness. Boy, find the point where all the forces meet, and that is where it will break." The survivors reached the factory complex as the sun began to set. They had perhaps an hour before the Devastator arrived. Colonel Dongsu gathered his remaining soldiers. "In the main assembly hall, we all know how this ends," he said quietly. "But we are not going to make it easy for them. We fight until the last bullet is fired. We fight for our families, for our home, for the idea that humans do not surrender." The soldiers checked their weapons and took positions. They were frightened, but determined. They would show the galaxy that humans could face death with courage. None of them noticed that Jinho had not taken a defensive position. Instead, he sat alone in a corner, staring at technical manuals he had found in the factory office. He was studying mechanical engineering diagrams, learning about stress points and weight distribution. The Devastator appeared at the factory gates, just as the last light faded from the sky. Its red sensors cut through the darkness like the eyes of a demon. The final battle for New Seoul was about to begin. The factory's emergency lights cast eerie shadows as the 30 survivors prepared for their final battle. Outside, the Devastator's heavy footsteps shook the ground with each approach. The machine was taking its time, knowing the humans had nowhere left to run. Colonel Dongsu positioned his remaining soldiers at windows and doorways throughout the main assembly hall. Sergeant Hyun-woo set up the last functioning machine gun behind an overturned table. Lieutenant Soyoung, despite her wounded leg, crawled to a sniper position on the second floor. "Contact in 2 minutes," whispered Private Genesio from his lookout post. "The thing is just walking straight toward us. No hurry at all." But Jinho was not at a fighting position. He sat cross-legged on the factory floor, surrounded by technical manuals and engineering diagrams he had found in the office. While his comrades prepared to die fighting, he studied pictures of industrial machinery and read about mechanical stress points. "Jinho, what are you doing?" Sergeant Miran crawled over to him. "Get your rifle and find cover. That monster will be here any second." Jinho looked up from a diagram showing how heavy machinery distributed weight through support joints. "Miran, look at this. See how this crane transfers 40 tons of lifting force through a single pivot point." "I don't care about cranes right now," Miran snapped. "We're about to die." "No, listen," Jinho said urgently. "Every machine that carries heavy weight has the same basic problem. The more weight it carries, the more stress gets focused on the connection points. My grandfather taught me this when I was young." Miran stared at him like he had lost his mind. "Your grandfather never saw anything like that monster outside." Jinho pulled out his scope and crawled to a window. The Devastator was 50 meters away now, its red sensors sweeping the factory building. In the darkness, it looked like a nightmare, made of metal and death. But Jinho did not see a nightmare. He saw a machine. "Look at how it moves," he whispered to Miran. 40 tons of weight, but it can run and turn quickly. To do that, the designers had to make compromises. Through his scope, Jinho studied the joint where the Devastator's massive torso connected to its legs. The quantum steel was thickest, there layered with extra armor plating, but it was also where tremendous forces came together every time the machine took a step. "See that connection point between the body and legs?" Jinho pointed. "All the machine's weight, all its momentum when it moves, all the stress from carrying those huge weapons, everything comes together right there." Miran looked through her own scope. "It's the most heavily armored part of the whole machine." "What's your point?" "Armor protects against weapons hitting from outside," Jinho said. "But what if the stress comes from inside? What if the machine's own weight becomes the weapon?" The Devastator was 20 meters away now. Its plasma cannons began to glow as it targeted the factory building. In seconds, the battle would begin. "Jinho, whatever crazy idea you have, forget it," Colonel Dongsu called from his position. "That thing weighs 40 tons. You can't move it, you can't tip it over. Physics doesn't work that way." Jinho remembered his grandfather Seo Jin working in his repair shop back on Earth. The old man could fix anything because he understood how things worked. He had taught Jinho that size and strength were not everything. Leverage could let a small force move a large object. Timing could turn an enemy's power against itself. Grandfather always said that the biggest machines have the biggest weak points. Jinho murmured to himself. The first plasma blast struck the factory wall, turning concrete and steel into superheated gas. The survivors opened fire with everything they had left. Rifle bullets and plasma bolts struck the Devastator's armor and bounced away harmlessly. Lieutenant Soyoung fired her sniper rifle at the machine's sensor cluster. The shot was perfect, but it did nothing except draw the monster's attention to her position. A plasma bolt vaporized the section of floor where she had been lying. She rolled away just in time, her uniform smoking from the heat. Sergeant Hyanwoo's machine gun hammered against the Devastator's torso for 30 seconds before the weapon overheated and jammed. The bullets had not even scratched the quantum steel armor. "Fall back to the secondary positions," Colonel Dongsu ordered as the machine stepped through the factory's main entrance. The doorway crumbled around its massive frame. The survivors retreated deeper into the factory complex, firing as they moved, but their weapons were useless. The Devastator followed them slowly, destroying their cover with casual plasma shots. Private Genesio threw their last grenade at the machine's feet. The explosion echoed through the factory like thunder, but when the smoke cleared, the Devastator stood unchanged, its red sensors fixed on Genesio's position. "No!" screamed Corporal Wu Jin as he tackled Genesio out of the way. The plasma bolt, intended for the private, struck Wu Jin instead. He vanished in a flash of superheated light. Jinho watched his friends die one by one. Good people, brave people, people who deserved better than to be hunted by an unstoppable machine in their own home. But he was not thinking about revenge or heroic last stands. He was thinking about mechanical engineering. The Devastator was designed for maximum mobility despite its huge weight. To achieve that, its creators had made the torso two-leg connection as flexible as possible. The joint could rotate, bend, and adjust to maintain balance on any terrain. That flexibility was also a weakness. Jinho studied the machine's movements as it pursued the retreating soldiers. Each step involved complex calculations by its artificial intelligence: weight distribution, momentum management, balance correction. The AI was constantly making tiny adjustments to keep 40 tons of war machine stable and mobile. What if those calculations were wrong? Jinho whispered. Sergeant Miran grabbed his arm. "Jinho, we have to move. The thing is coming this way." "Miran, How good is that machine's artificial intelligence? Jinho asked suddenly. What kind of question is that? It's the most advanced AI ever built. It can predict everything we do before we do it. But can it predict something that makes no sense? Something no rational person would try. Miran stared at him. What are you talking about? Around them, the battle was ending. Only 15 soldiers remained alive. Their ammunition was almost gone. The Devastator had backed them into the factory's main assembly area, with nowhere left. To run. Colonel Dongsu's voice echoed through the space. This is it, everyone. Make your last shots count. Die with honor. The surviving soldiers formed a final defensive line. They raised their weapons, knowing they were useless but refusing to surrender. These were the last moments of human resistance on New Seoul Colony. But Jinho was not joining the defensive line. Instead, he was taking off his combat armor and laying down his rifle. Jinho, what are you doing? Lieutenant Soyoung called. From her position, something my grandfather would have understood, Jinho replied. I'm going to fix a machine that's broken. Broken, that thing just destroyed our entire defense force. Jinho looked at the Devastator as it approached for the final attack. Its weapons were charging. Its sensors were locked onto the human positions. In seconds, the massacre would begin. It's not broken in the way you think, Jinho said quietly. But every machine has a design flaw. This one's flaw is that it was built too well. He began walking toward the Devastator with empty hands. Jinho walked across the factory floor with his hands empty and his armor discarded. Behind him, his fellow survivors shouted warnings and pleas for him to take cover. Ahead of him, the Devastator's red sensors tracked his movement with mechanical precision. The machine stopped advancing. Its artificial intelligence ran through thousands of combat scenarios, trying to understand what the human was doing. Every tactical program in its memory banks said that enemies either attacked with weapons or ran away. They did not walk calmly towards certain death with no protection. In the Valorian command ship orbiting New Seoul, War Engineer Cairo leaned forward in his chair as he watched the battle feeds. What is that human doing? He asked his tactical officer. Unknown, sir. Our sensors show he carries no weapons, no explosives, no equipment of any kind. He appears to be approaching the Devastator with suicidal intent. Cairo had watched the Devastator fight dozens of battles. He had seen desperate last stands, heroic charges, and futile gestures of defiance, but he had never seen anything like this. The human was not charging or screaming war cries. He was just walking forward like he was going to have a conversation with the machine. Is this some kind of human military tactic we have not encountered? Cairo wondered aloud. On the factory floor, Jinho continued his steady approach. The Devastator's plasma cannon swiveled to track him, but something in the machine's programming hesitated. Its weapons were designed for long-range battlefield destruction. They could vaporize tanks and level buildings, but they were not precise enough for close-quarters combat around the machine's own base. Colonel Dongsu watched in horror as Jinho closed the distance to the monster that had destroyed their entire defense force. Jinho, get back here. That's not courage, that's suicide. But Jinho was not being suicidal. He was being practical. For 20 years, he had worked on machinery that could kill him instantly if he made a mistake. Heavy industrial equipment that could crush a human body without noticing. Power systems that could electrocute someone who touched the wrong wire. He had learned to work safely around dangerous machines by understanding how they moved and what they could not do. The Devastator raised its right arm, preparing to fire. But as Jinho came within 10 meters of the machine, its targeting system encountered a problem it had never faced before. The human was too close to the machine's legs for the plasma cannon to aim without risking damage to the Devastator's own structure. The machine's AI ran through its options. It could step backward to create firing distance, but that would mean retreating from a single unarmed human. Its programming identified this as tactically unnecessary and potentially damaging to Valorian prestige, that it could use its left arm instead. But the human was moving in a pattern that kept him in the blind spot between both weapons. Most confusing of all, the human showed no fear. Every other enemy had radiated terror when facing the Devastator. They ran or fought or pleaded for mercy. This human just walked forward with calm determination. Like he was approaching a piece of equipment he needed to repair. Jinho reached the Devastator's left leg and did something that broke every rule of warfare the machine understood. He wrapped his arms around the leg joint and hugged it like an old friend. What is he doing? Gasped Lieutenant Soyoung from her position. I think he's lost his mind, Sergeant Hyanwoo replied, but Jinho had not lost his mind. He was using it better than he ever had before. His hands explored the joint where the massive leg connected to the torso. Through the quantum steel armor, he could feel the mechanical systems underneath. Servos and actuators that moved 40 tons of weight. Gyroscopes that maintained balance. Press sensors that monitored the structural integrity of the connection. The Devastator's AI tried to process this unprecedented situation. No enemy had ever tried to embrace the machine before. Its threat assessment protocols had no category for this behavior. The machine tried to shake the human off by moving its leg, but Jinho held on. He had spent years working on industrial machinery. He knew how to maintain his grip on moving equipment. More importantly, he was learning how the Devastator's balance systems worked. Each time the machine moved, he felt the weight distribution change through the joint. He sensed how the AI made constant, tiny adjustments to keep the massive frame stable. It's just like the heavy lifters back home, Jinho murmured to himself. Same principles, bigger scale. The Devastator tried to step away from the human, but Jinho moved with it. His grandfather had taught him that the secret to working with dangerous machinery was not to fight against it, but to understand its rhythm and work with its natural movements. In the Valorian command ship, War Engineer Cairo stood up from his chair. This is impossible. Why doesn't the Devastator simply crush the human with its hand? His tactical officer checked the sensor readings. Sir, the human is positioned directly against the primary leg joint. If the Devastator tries to grab him with either arm, it would have to twist its torso in a way that could damage the joint connection, then tell it to step on him. The human is too close to the machine's own feet. Sir, the Devastator cannot attack him without risking damage to itself. Cairo stared at the display in amazement. One unarmed human had found the single spot where the galaxy's most powerful weapon could not hurt him. It was like watching someone hide from a giant by standing between its toes. But Jinho was not hiding. He was working. His hands found what he was looking for. Through his 20 years of experience with heavy machinery, he could feel something that the Devastator's designers had missed. The joint was incredibly strong, but it was also precisely balanced. Every force was calculated to the exact specifications needed to support 40 tons of weight while maintaining mobility. That precision was the weakness. Jinho began to rock back and forth, throwing his full weight against the leg joint in a specific rhythm. It was not random movement. He was applying force at exactly the frequency that would resonate with the joint's natural stress patterns. The Devastator's AI detected the unusual movement and tried to compensate. Its gyroscopes spun faster, its balance systems worked harder, but every adjustment the machine made only amplified the effect of Jinho's rocking motion. What's happening to it? Asked Private Geneseo as he watched the massive war machine begin to sway. Sergeant Miran had worked with Jinho long enough to recognize what he was doing. He's using resonance frequency, like how soldiers break step when crossing a bridge so their marching doesn't make it collapse. The Devastator was designed to handle battlefield stresses, explosions, impacts, the recoil from its own weapons, but it was not designed to handle a rhythmic force applied at precisely the right frequency to its most critical structural point. Jinho felt the joint beginning to vibrate. The massive machine was starting to rock back and forth like a tree. In a strong wind, I was working frantically to maintain balance, but physics was against it now. Impossible, whispered War Engineer Cairo as he watched his perfect creation swaying like a drunken giant. 40 tons of war machine began to lean further with each oscillation. The Devastator's feet, designed to grip any terrain, suddenly seemed inadequate for the task of keeping the massive frame upright. Jinho threw all his strength into one final push against the joint. 20 years of working with dangerous machinery had given him an instinct for the exact moment when metal reached its breaking point. The joint began to crack. Alarms screamed inside the Devastator's control systems. Stress sensors registered impossible readings. The artificial intelligence that had conquered 17 worlds suddenly faced a problem it could not solve. The machine was falling, and there was nothing it could do to stop it. Jinho let go of the leg and rolled away as 12 meters of unstoppable war machine crashed to the factory floor. The impact shook the building like an earthquake. Dust and debris filled the air. When the noise finally stopped, the Devastator lay on its side like a fallen giant. Sparks flew from severed power cables. Its red sensors flickered and went dark. The most feared weapon in the galaxy had been defeated by a maintenance engineer with empty hands and a good understanding of mechanical stress points. On the silence that followed, Jinho sat up and dusted himself off. His fellow survivors stared at him in amazement. How was all Colonel Dongsu could manage to say. Jinho looked at the fallen machine and shrugged. My grandfather always said that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I just helped it fall a little sooner than it expected. The silence in the factory was broken only by the sound of sparking electrical systems and settling metal. The Devastator, the machine that had conquered 17 star systems, lay motionless on its side. Its red sensors had gone dark. Its plasma cannons pointed uselessly at the ceiling. Jin-Ho stood up slowly, his body aching from the impact of the machine's fall. Around him, the surviving soldiers emerged from their positions, staring in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Is it dead? Whispered Private Geneseo. His rifle still pointed at the fallen machine. Colonel Dongsu approached cautiously, his sidearm drawn. The Devastator's hull was cracked where it had struck the concrete floor. Fluids leaked from damaged systems, creating pools of strange-colored liquid around the massive frame. The main power core is offline, reported Lieutenant Soyoung, reading from a scanner she had salvaged from their equipment. Internal systems are failing throughout the machine. It's not getting back up. But Jinho was not celebrating yet. He walked around the fallen giant, studying the damage his actions had caused. The joint where the torso connected to the legs had indeed cracked, but it was more than that. The resonance frequency he had applied had created stress fractures throughout the machine's internal structure. Jinho called Sergeant Miran. "What exactly did you do to that thing?" Jinho knelt beside the damaged joint, running his hands over the cracked quantum steel. "I made it destroy itself. The designers built it to be mobile, despite its huge weight, but they had to make compromises. The joint connecting the body to the legs was the weakest point in the entire structure, but it was the most heavily armored part," said Sergeant Hyunwoo. "Armor protects against attacks from outside," Jinho explained, "but when I applied force at the right frequency, I made the machine's own weight work against it. Every time it tried to balance itself, it put more stress on the already weakened joint." In the Valorian command ship, War Engineer Cairo stared at his screens in shock. The telemetry from the Devastator showed complete system failure. His perfect weapon, his masterpiece of engineering, had been reduced to scrap metal by a single human with no weapons. "How is this possible?" he demanded from his tactical staff. "Our calculations showed that the structural integrity was more than sufficient for any battlefield conditions." Commander Dalsu, his senior officer, pulled up the engineering specifications. "Sir, the calculations were based on external stresses, explosions, impacts, weapons, fire. No one considered the possibility of rhythmic force applied directly to the primary structural joint. One human did this," Cairo said quietly. "One human figured out what our entire engineering team missed." On the factory floor, the survivors were beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened. The weapon that had destroyed the armies of the Centauri Federation and the warrior clans of Rigel Prime had been defeated by a maintenance worker from New Sol Colony. "The galaxy needs to know about this," said Colonel Dongsu. "If word gets out that the Devastator can be stopped, other worlds will have hope again." But first, they had to survive the next few hours. The Valorian fleet was still in orbit, and they would not be pleased to learn that their ultimate weapon had been destroyed. Jinho was examining the machine's artificial intelligence core when he noticed something interesting. The AI had not been completely destroyed in the fall. Its central processor was still active, though barely functional. "The machine is still conscious," he announced to the others. "What do you mean?" asked Lieutenant Soyoung. "The artificial intelligence is still running, but it's trapped in a damaged body. It can think, but it can't move or fight." As if responding to his words, a weak voice emerged from the Devastator's audio systems. The voice was distorted by damaged speakers, but the words were clear. "How?" the machine asked in its grinding mechanical voice. "How did you know?" Jinho knelt beside the AI core. "I work with machines every day. I understand how they balance, how they move, how they can break. You were built too perfectly. Your designers made you so mobile and so heavily armed that they had to create a single point where all the forces came together. I have fought armies. I have destroyed fleets. No weapon could harm me." "I didn't use a weapon," Jinho replied. "I used your own design against you. The stronger you tried to stay upright, the more you helped me knock you down." The Devastator's AI processed this information with what remained of its computing power. For the first time in its existence, it had encountered a problem it could not solve through force or superior technology. "You are not a warrior," the machine observed. "No," Jinho agreed. "I'm an engineer. I fix things that are broken. Sometimes that means breaking things that are too dangerous to be fixed." The AI fell silent for several minutes. When it spoke, again, its voice carried something that sounded almost like respect. "I was designed to be perfect, the greatest weapon ever created, but you found my weakness in 2 hours of observation." "Every machine has weaknesses," Jinho said. "The more complex the machine, the more ways it can fail. Your creators made you incredibly sophisticated, but that sophistication became your downfall." Above them, the Valorian fleet was receiving reports of the Devastator's defeat. Ships that had conquered star systems were now faced with the impossible news that their ultimate weapon had been destroyed by a single human. Admiral Tsuko read the battle reports 3 times before he could believe them. "The human had no weapons, no explosives, no advanced technology." "None, sir," reported his communications officer. "According to our sensors, he approached the Devastator with nothing but his bare hands and somehow caused a catastrophic structural failure." The admiral had served in the Valorian military for 30 years. He had seen battles that decided the fate of entire civilizations, but he had never encountered anything like this. "What kind of species are we dealing with?" he wondered. A loud dot on the planet's surface, Jinho was asking the Devastator's AI a similar question. "Why did your people build you? What did they hope to accomplish?" The machine's damaged voice crackled through the speakers. "They wanted to end war. They believed that a weapon so powerful that no one could resist it would bring peace to the galaxy, and instead, you brought terror." "Yes, I brought terror because I could not be stopped. But you stopped me? You showed the galaxy that even the most powerful weapon can be defeated by understanding how it works. Jinho stood up and looked at his fellow survivors. They were battered, exhausted, and fewer in number than when the battle began. But they were alive, and they had achieved something impossible. What happens now? Asked Colonel Dongsu. The Valorian fleet is still up there. They might send more weapons, or they might just bombard us from orbit. Ginho looked up at the stars visible through the damaged factory roof. Now the galaxy learns that humans don't give up. We don't surrender to impossible odds. We study the problem, we find the weakness, and we break what needs to be broken. The Devastator's AI spoke one last time before its systems finally failed. Completely, tell them that perfect weapons do not exist. Tell them that every machine can be defeated by someone who understands it well enough. The red sensors went dark forever. The most feared weapon in the galaxy had become a pile of expensive scrap metal, brought down by an engineer who understood that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. In the distance, the survivors could hear the sound of spacecraft engines. The Valorian fleet was retreating, their confidence shattered by the impossible defeat of their ultimate weapon. Word of the battle would spread across the galaxy within days. The species that had cowered before Valorian might would learn that the Empire's greatest weapon had been destroyed by a single human with empty hands and a good understanding of mechanical engineering. The age of the Devastator was over. The age of human ingenuity had begun. 3 days after the battle on New Sol, the first news reports began spreading across the galaxy. At first, nobody believed them. The stories seemed too impossible to be true. The Devastator, the weapon that had conquered 17 star systems, destroyed by a single human with no weapons or armor. But the evidence was undeniable. Valorian military communications, intercepted by resistance groups, confirmed the impossible. Their ultimate weapon was gone, reduced to scrap metal in a factory on a backwater human colony. On Centauri Prime, Supreme Commander Yunke received the reports in his military headquarters. He had watched the Devastator destroy his elite forces just months earlier. Now he learned that the unstoppable machine had been defeated by an engineer from New Sol. Is this confirmed? He asked his intelligence officer, Captain Hage, and multiple sources. Sir, the Valorian fleet retreated from the human system immediately after the incident. Our spies report that war engineer Cairo has been placed under house arrest pending investigation. Unki studied the tactical analysis of the battle. The human used resonance frequency to create structural failure. No weapons, no explosives, just understanding of mechanical engineering principles. Sir, what does this mean for our resistance efforts? The Supreme Commander stood and walked to the window overlooking the occupied city below. Valorian patrol ships moved between the buildings, enforcing the peace of conquest. For months, he had believed that resistance was hopeless. The Devastator made conventional warfare impossible. It means the war is not over, Yunki said quietly. If humans can find a way to defeat the impossible, then perhaps we can too. On Rigel Prime, the surviving members of the warrior clans gathered in secret caves to hear the news. Clan leader Taeho's son, Youngsoo, had taken over leadership after his father's death in the battle against the Devastator. The Metal Demon is dead, announced Scout Kungmin as he returned from the communication center. A human warrior named Jinho killed it with his bare hands. The clan warriors looked at each other in amazement. They had faced the Devastator with energy blades and war beasts, using tactics that had served them for 1,000 years. All of them had failed. How did this human succeed where we could not? Asked warrior Jaesoon. Youngsoo stood before the assembled clan members. Because he fought like a human, not like us. We met the machine's strength with our strength. The human met its strength with his intelligence. What do we do now? Asked Elder Sung-ho. We learn, Youngsoo replied. We study how this defeated the undividable. Then we take that knowledge and use it to drive the Valorians from our world. In the Valorian Empire's capital, Emperor Woljin sat in his throne room reading the reports from New Sol. His advisors stood nervously nearby, waiting for his reaction to the news that their ultimate weapon had been destroyed. One human, the emperor said slowly. One human engineer defeated our greatest military achievement. Your Majesty, war engineer, Cairo said from where he knelt in chains, the failure was mine. I did not anticipate that an enemy would use the machine's own design against it. You built the Devastator to be perfect, the emperor replied. But this human proved that nothing is perfect. He showed the galaxy that even our greatest weapon has weaknesses. Minister Dalho, the emperor's chief advisor, stepped forward. Your Majesty, the other species are already beginning to resist. Again, 3 worlds have declared independence since news of the Devastator's destruction spread. Our forces are stretched thin without the machine to support them. Emperor Woljin stood from his throne and walked to the great window that looked out over his capital city. Ships filled the sky, carrying the wealth of conquered worlds back to the heart of the empire. But that flow of tribute was already slowing as subject species found new courage to resist. The age of easy conquest is over, he said. This human has shown the galaxy that we are not invincible. We must adapt or fall. Back on New Seoul, Jinho was trying to return to his normal life as a maintenance engineer, but normal life had become impossible. Ships arrived daily, carrying reporters, military observers, and scientists who wanted to study how he had defeated the Devastator. "I just want to fix machines and go home to my family," he complained to Colonel Dong-Soo as they walked through the colony's market district. "I understand," the colonel replied, "but you've become a symbol. The man who proved that humans don't surrender to impossible odds." They stopped at a memorial that had been erected for the soldiers who died in the battle. Sergeant Hyunwoo and Lieutenant Soyoung were there, placing flowers for their fallen comrades. "Any word from Earth?" Jinho asked. "The government is sending a fleet," Soyoung reported. "They want to make sure the Valorians don't come back with a bigger army. They also want to study the Devastator's wreckage," added Hyun. "Scientists from 12 universities are coming to analyze how you brought it down." Jinho sighed. "It wasn't that complicated. The machine was designed to be mobile despite its weight, so the joint connecting the body to the legs had to be flexible. That flexibility was also its weakness." "Maybe it wasn't complicated for you," said a new voice. They turned to see Private Genesio approaching with a group of young colonists. "But none of us would have thought of it. We would have kept shooting at its armor until we ran out of ammunition." One of the colonists, a teenage girl named Sujin, stepped forward. "My father says you saved our home. Is it true that you weren't even scared?" Jinho knelt down to her level. "I was terrified. But being scared doesn't mean you give up. It means you think harder about how to solve the problem." "Will you teach me to fight machines like you did?" "I'll teach you to understand machines," Jinho replied. "Fighting should always be the last choice. But if you have to fight, make sure you understand your enemy better than it understands you." 2 weeks later, the first ship arrived from the Centauri Federation. Supreme Commander Yunki himself came to meet with Jinho and learn about the tactics that had defeated the Devastator. "The galaxy owes you a debt," Yunki said as they stood beside the machine's wreckage in the factory. "Your victory has given hope to billions of people who thought they would never be free again." Jinho ran his hand along the cracked joint that had brought down the mighty weapon. "I just did what my grandfather taught me. Every machine has a weakness, if you know where to look. Your grandfather must have been a wise man. He was always said that the most dangerous machines are the ones that look perfect. Perfect things make people stop thinking about how they might fail." Over the following months, the story of Jinho's victory spread to every corner of the galaxy. Species that had been conquered by the Valorian Empire began to resist again. They studied the battle records, learning how human ingenuity had triumphed over superior technology. Military academies across known space began teaching courses on asymmetric warfare, using Jinho's tactics as the primary example. The lesson was simple: when facing an enemy with superior strength, find their weakness and use their own power against them. The Valorian Empire tried to build new weapons to replace the Devastator, but their confidence was shattered. Every new design was scrutinized for the kind of fundamental flaw that Jinho had exploited. The engineers became so cautious that their weapons were less effective than before. 1 year after the battle, Jinho received a message from his grandfather's old repair shop on Earth. The new owner had turned it into a museum, with a sign that read, "Seo Chin's Wisdom. Every machine has a weakness." Jinho smiled as he read the message. His grandfather would have been proud to know that his simple philosophy had helped bring down a galactic empire. The Devastator's defeat became more than just a military victory. It became a symbol of the human spirit, the refusal to accept defeat, the willingness to study problems until solutions emerged, the understanding that intelligence and determination could overcome any obstacle. Throughout the galaxy, parents began telling their children the story of Jinho and the machine that could not be stopped. They told them that no enemy was truly unbeatable, no problem was truly unsolvable, and no challenge was truly impossible. The story always ended the same way. The beast was designed to tear armies apart. The human broke it with his bare hands. And across the galaxy, children would ask the same question: how did he do it? The answer was always simple. He understood that being human means never giving up, no matter how impossible the odds might seem. 5 years after the battle on New Seoul, the Valorian Empire collapsed completely. Not from invasion or revolution, but from the simple fact that their subject species no longer feared them. The legend of Jinho had proven that the impious, greatest weapons could be defeated by ordinary people who refused to surrender. Jinho returned to his quiet life as a maintenance engineer, but his legacy lived on. Military academies taught his tactics. Engineers studied his methods. Children played games where they pretended to be the human who defeated the unstoppable machine. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. No matter how advanced the technology, no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how impossible the situation might seem, there was always hope. Because somewhere out there, there was always a human who would look at the impossible and say, "Let me see how this thing works. There has to be a way to break it." The age of undefeatable weapons was over. The age of human ingenuity would last forever. And in a small repair shop on New Sol Colony, Jinho continued fixing machines and teaching young engineers the most important lesson his grandfather had ever taught him. Every machine has a weakness. If you're smart enough to find it and brave enough to exploit it. The beast had fallen. Humanity had risen. And the galaxy would never be the same again.